Hello, everyone. We're going to be doing a tier list based on some popular political commentators, and we're going to start with Ben Shapiro. So, pros on Ben Shapiro: one is he talks really fast, which I think is actually important when it comes to a content creator, especially if they're repeating information, which is inevitable when you're talking about politics or really any issue. That's a pro. Another pro, good at debating. But some cons, I'd say, he has elitist takes, in my opinion. In 2016, he had this take that he was basically too smart to vote for Donald Trump, or he was too intellectual, sort of overthought this theory about why Donald Trump was going to be so bad for the Republican Party and America in general. So he basically told his audience, I'm not voting for Trump. Has since admitted he was wrong on that. But I think he has this attitude about other things as well. Like, I've heard him argue for the flat tax, where maybe in theory that would work to have a flat tax. But when you have a system already where very rich people already have a lot of tax breaks, pay low marginal rates as it is, lots of special interest in government. The idea of a flat tax is just way too theoretical and basically an elitist take because it would just benefit rich people. I don't really know who Ben Shapiro's core audience is because I think a lot of his views are basically rich people that just don't like Democrats. So I don't know who his main audience is. He's very popular, so clearly a lot of people listen to him. But in my opinion, he's somewhat out of touch. So I'm going to put him in the C tier. Okay, moving on, Joe Rogan. I think Joe Rogan's a great overall commentator. He has a show, very popular, probably the most popular podcast still on earth. Maybe it's dipped a little bit since like the peak, but if it has, not very much. It very well could still be number one. He just signed a huge new deal with Spotify. He gets guests on from all different walks of life. He doesn't really care who comes on. He speaks his mind. He's not an expert on politics, and I think he admits that, but he's curious, and I think that's a positive for him. And I definitely don't get the feeling when I watch his show that he has allegiance one way or the other. I don't think he cares. I think he's willing to call out stuff he doesn't like on the right, stuff he doesn't like on the left, and just his humongous platform and his willingness to have all different types of voices on, I think is a very positive thing. So I'm going to put him in the A tier. Rachel Maddow, MSNBC, way too partisan, way too of a allegiance to the Democratic Party. And there was that period where she was just talking about the Russia collusion, seemingly every day on her show. That's turned out to basically not be true. So she's going to get a D just for straight up, totally partisan, way too partisan. I don't think that level of partisanship is good for political discourse. Okay, next one. A lot of people would say this is the mirror image to Rachel Maddow, Tucker Carlson. I don't agree with that. I think Tucker Carlson is certainly has partisan bias towards the right wing, but I think he's willing to call it the right wing as well. I like that he's interested in other countries that aren't just America. Like, I'm Canadian. He talks about Canadian politics. He was just recently in Russia interviewing Vladimir Putin, which, by the way, I thought was a pretty boring interview, actually. And I know pretty much if you're on the left, you probably don't like Tucker Carlson at all. I happen to think he's a good reporter. He's definitely biased. I wouldn't consider him straight down the middle at all, but I'm going to put Tucker Carlson in the A tier. Ann Coulter is actually a better example of the mirror image of Rachel Maddow. Ann Coulter has, I think, gotten a lot more negative in recent years. She probably already was a little bit, but anytime I hear her on a show now, it's always so negative, going right at people. I mean, she's really flipped on Donald Trump. She really does not like Donald Trump at all. But anytime I see her on a show recently or a tweet or whatever it is, it's just constant complaining. And so for that, I'm going to put Ann Coulter in the D tier. Next up, Bill Maher, who I think Bill Maher is kind of funny. He gets a lot of credit from the right wing just for not being completely left-wing hack. So I find it funny that when Bill Maher has a take that's more conservative, all the conservatives applaud, like, oh, this guy's so smart. He's such a genius. So having said that, I do like Bill Maher. I like his show. I think he's funny. I think he has a lot of interesting conversations on that show. And even a lot of his criticisms of Donald Trump, I think, are legitimate. And aside from that, it's impressive how Bill Maher continues to be relevant no matter what the political climate is. Like, if you think about a guy like John Oliver, very popular a few years ago, not as much now. Even a guy like Jon Stewart, very popular in the early 2010s, maybe towards the end of like the end of 2000s. Right now, he's kind of making a comeback now, but he had about that 8-year period where he essentially fell off the map. I think a guy like Bill Maher, whatever the political climate is, he's done a good job of staying either at or right near the top. So I'm going to put Bill Maher. Actually, I'm going to put him in A. Next up is Destiny. Destiny is a popular live streamer. I think most people now are at least aware of who he is. I'm a fan of Destiny. I think his streams are interesting. And again, he's a guy that's willing to talk to both sides. However, I think Destiny has a reputation of being this open-minded guy, but if you watch his streams, he has kind of his view, which is more of a centrist view, sort of some takes from the left, some takes from the right. But the thing I don't like about Destiny is if someone deviates from his views, even 10%, he'll call them an unhinged lunatic or something like that. He really bashes people for little deviations from his position. So for that, I'm going to put Destiny at a B. Next up, Hasan Piker, who I actually don't watch a lot of this guy's content because it's so predictable, but it's even more, it's like when you're in college and you're maybe a second-year university student, it's like that brain. Hasan Piker has never grown out of that. All of his takes are right through that filter of what does basically a second-year socialist student think, and then I'm going to recycle that onto every issue, which whatever. I mean, he's made millions of dollars doing that, but I don't think it's particularly interesting. And I mean, in terms of being a hypocrite, he's probably number one. If this was a hypocrite list, he'd be above the S tier because, I mean, he talks about socialism all the time, but multi-millionaire, lives in a huge house, ridiculous. So Hasan Piker is definitely in the D tier. Next up, Candace Owens. I think Candace Owens is great. I think she has an ability to talk about things that are very unpopular, and she's okay with taking a bunch of hits for her out there opinions. I mean, I don't know all the opinions, but I know she does go out there. But I think she's articulate and smart enough to kind of at least have an argument for them. I definitely don't agree with everything she says, but I think she's entertaining, and I think her, in terms of political bravery, she's probably right at the top of this list. So I'm a fan. I'm going to put Candace Owens in the A tier. Jordan Peterson, I'm going to be biased here. He's Canadian. I'm Canadian. I mean, maybe that doesn't make me biased, but I think Jordan Peterson's great. I think he has a good take on a lot of different issues. He can talk about like psychology or kind of get into the why people are doing this. He's smart enough to talk about economics, geopolitics. He's very thoughtful. He cries on camera sometimes, but overall, I think Jordan Peterson is great. Any conversation, I think, is for the most part enhanced by him being there. He has a unique perspective. And again, in terms of just intelligence, he's probably at the top of this list, but overall, I'm going to say Jordan Peterson's at the top. I'm going to put him in S tier. Cenk Uygur, I think that's how you pronounce that. I think a lot of people on the right think he's just a hack, and he always goes, of course, of course. I like Cenk, actually. I think he's a good commentator. I find him entertaining. I think he has a good take from a left-wing point of view on economics. I think a lot of the left wing has gone to this always talking about social issues and cultural issues. I think Cenk, and I'd include Anna and the Young Turks in this, I like that they've stayed on message about why or what are the economics of America and how come the median worker is struggling, the average employee is not really getting a raise. I think Cenk's good about addressing that issue. So I'm actually going to put Cenk in the A tier. He does say a lot of stuff that, I mean, I haven't watched him that much in the last few years, but I remember when I used to watch more of the Young Turks. I certainly disagree with him all the time, but I think more people need to talk about wealth inequality. And I don't think that issue is just a left-wing issue, by the way. I think the right wing should talk about that too. So I hope the right wing talks more about that. But I mean, right now they're trying to win an election. So I'd say Cenk, though, I'm going to put him in A tier. And final person on this list, Patrick Bet-David. He has an entertaining show, Valuetainment Podcast, PBD Podcast. Probably a couple months ago, I'd probably put him a little bit higher, but I think the show is a little bit stuck in a rut about just being, it's almost like partisan toward just being quote unquote anti-establishment. And that sort of lens kind of everything that Patrick Bet-David, I think, talks about politically, at least recently, is through the lens of, oh, I want to be anti-establishment, which makes the show a little bit less interesting because it just has become, I think, for me at least, predictable. But I still think Patrick Bet-David's a good commentator. He's articulate. He's easy to listen to. But I'm going to put him for that reason of I think he's just too far down the rabbit hole of just everything anti-establishment. I'm going to put him in the B tier. So with that said, there's my list. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you completely agree or disagree? Maybe you should disagree on one person or the other person. Let me know why I'm wrong in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.